Welcome back to this new episode of Off the Shelf Book Talk with Book Lovers. I'm Elizabeth Nelson here with Kay Johnson. What have you been reading, Kay?
Well, as I was telling you earlier, I'm reading just a fun book by a woman named Nancy Worrell, W-A-R-R-L. It's called The Vampire Knitting Club. It's the first in a series. And it's about a young woman who's 27 years old, who's kind of finding herself. She's got a business degree, and her parents are archaeologists, and they're somewhere in the Middle East.
Okay.
And she was with her parents, and she decided, well, she was downsized from her job, went to see her parents, and then thought she'd visit her grandmother in Oxford. And she gets to Oxford only to find out that the knitting shop her grandmother owns is locked up, and there's no grandma. And she finds out her grandmother died.
Oh.
And she was buried. And so she goes to the lawyer and finds out she inherited everything, including this knitting store.
Yeah.
Well, things get complicated when she discovers that her grandmother is not dead. She is a member of the undead. She's a vampire. And there's a whole group of vampires that live underneath the knitting shop. And they meet on Wednesday nights and knit because it helps them relax. And so every morning this woman has a new sweater in a little bag that they knitted the night before. And so anyway, so her shop was just broken into, and her order book was taken, and they think someone thought it was a spell book. She's actually a witch. And
Why not?
right. And
Does she have a ghost in the upstairs attic too?
Not yet, but there might be. Her cat is her familiar.
Oh, okay.
And so it's actually pretty good, and her protector is Rafe, the vampire.
Okay.
And he speaks Latin because, hello, he was in Rome at the turn of...
Why not?
yeah, and but it's remarkably good, I have to say. So I needed a break from heavier stuff, so this was perfect.
Vampires knitting sounds pretty light.
Well, it's certainly a unique approach.
It is, yes.
One that I can't really think. And then their blood comes from the blood. They have a doctor who's a vampire who runs a blood bank, and so they keep everything in large refrigerators. They drink blood out of insulated cups. It works, I guess.
I was expecting you to say teacups.
No,
I figured
insulated
that would
cups.
follow along with the knitting.
Yeah, but they're just sort of hanging out right now, and so
Interesting.
we'll see what happens.
Yes, you'll have to let us know.
So what are you reading?
Well, staying with the kind of sci-fi fantasy theme. Paranormal, yes. We'll go with
Cozy.
that.
That's what's called a paranormal cozy.
Well, this one wasn't cozy. This one was called The Lovecraft Compendium by H.P. Lovecraft. And he is famous for his character. The Call of Cthulhu is like his big book that everybody talks about. And now Cthulhu is like all over the place with board games. Big, don't ask. You're not going to want to know. But anyway, this is a collection of 5 short stories that he wrote that sort of build up to the Call of Cthulhu.
Is it considered sci-fi?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be science fiction, and they're a little more, probably horror, early horror. I think these were written back in like the 1900s, early 1900s. So,
are they like bloody and scary, or?
They can be scary. They're definitely horror generated because they have creatures that are coming in, and people are always talking about they're gonna go crazy and stuff like that. But they were really interesting. I really enjoyed them. I like science fiction, so for me they were great. And I haven't read any H.P. Lovecraft before, so I thought it was a great way to start and continue.
So would you read more?
Yeah, I would read more. Why not?
So what's the big book he wrote?
It is The Call of Cthulhu.
Have you read it?
I have not. So I started with these, and then also the stories in this sort of indirectly reference are referenced in the big book.
Okay.
So it sort of like builds the background before you get into the main novel.
Has he written a lot of things?
I think so.
I mean, the name's
don't know.
real
I don't know a
common.
lot about him. Like everybody knows him. Like I'm not super familiar with him, so I'd have to research and look more into it. I'm not going to sit here and read the stuff here. He died at 47. I can tell you that much.
Wow, his life was cut short.
So
What did he die of?
it does not say. Who knows? Maybe it's got something to do with the character in the book. You never
Yeah,
know.
Who knows?
Maybe he scared himself
Yeah, to
so
death.
much. But so I finished that one, and then I also finished this one here, which is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, I think is how you say the last name. And this is the first book that came out, and there's also a sequel which I haven't read yet, which is European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman. So
Those are interesting titles.
they are. These are science fiction. I'm, like I said, science fiction person here. But this book, it's an interesting way that it's written because there's a story written down, and then throughout you have people that are interjecting their thoughts on what's being written.
Oh.
So the story follows, it's a collection of women who their fathers are all well-known literary figures.
Okay.
So like you have Mary Jekyll. So
Okay.
her father was Dr. Jekyll. Her half-sister was Mr. Hyde's daughter.
Okay.
And then you have Beatrice Rappaccini, Catherine Moreau, Justine Frankenstein. So all of these women have like a famous literary father. And so
Okay.
they all get together just to help solve a mystery. And so the book is written as they've decided they need money. So they're going to sell their story. So then they'll be telling the story, and then somebody will reflect in on what's being said. So like right at the beginning here, the quote at the front of the book is "Here be monsters," and then it says, "Mary, I don't think that's the right epigraph for the book." Catherine, then you write the bloody thing. Honestly, I don't know why I agreed to do this. Mary, because we need money. Catherine, as usual. And so it's just stuff like that throughout the book.
Is it good?
Yeah, it was really good. So they'll just say things like, I don't think that's where you should start. Or no, we have to go back further than that and talk about something else. And so it was really good. It's an interesting way I thought of approaching it because, nobody really thought much about the daughter
Right.
point of view. So that was really interesting to me. And then I think the sequel introduces Lucinda Van Helsing.
Is
into
the
it.
sequel with the daughters again?
Yes, yep, and they call themselves the Athena Club. I don't remember the reasoning behind the name, but they call themselves that. And so then now they're going to travel to Austria to rescue her because
Okay.
they've received a telegram from her that she's in trouble. But just the way, I mean, it's the one person is writing the story, but then they're all interjecting their own thoughts. And so that's kind of fun.
Are they friends?
Yes, they all lived together.
Okay.
By the end of partway through this book, they all kind of come together. In the beginning of the book, Mary Jekyll's mother has just died, and her father has been dead. And then that's how she finds out she has this half-sister,
Okay.
and finds out what her father had been doing between the Jekyll and
did
Hyde
not
thing.
know?
I think she heard the rumors, but she didn't know for sure what had
Okay.
happened. And then they sort of collect and find these other women, and then they're all living in this house together with her housekeeper.
Okay.
And so it was interesting, but it's a really fun, easy read. I really enjoyed it, and I will read them again. And they have really pretty covers
Oh, yeah. Are there just the two books?
so far, yes.
Okay.
So we'll see. So I haven't read that one yet.
So next.
Maybe. I have some library books that I need to read so I can go back.
yeah.
So I don't get late fees.
Yeah, that's true.
They build up if you don't take your books back.
That's true.
The library frowns upon that. You keeping
Yeah.
the books and not
Yep,
returning
that's
them.
true.
So.
They can add up quickly.
What else have you been reading?
Well, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. And I've read all Sir Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes books. And so anyway, now there's lots of authors writing sequels to Sherlock Holmes books. And I came across a guy named Roger Ricard.
Okay.
And he's written 4 books about Holmes and Watson, and one is The 12 Days of Christmas. And another book of short stories is Alphabet of Cases, and then 2 novels, The Case of the Poison Lily and The Case of the Twain Papers.
Okay.
And they're actually really well done. I mean, sometimes when you read these knockoffs, so to speak, the language isn't right or something isn't right. You know, it hits a false note in your head when the rhythm isn't.
Yeah.
This was really right on. I mean, I felt really good about it, and but they were really good, and so I started with the 12 Days of Christmas, which I got free as a Kindle Unlimited, and then he had more, so I just kept reading them. And the 12 Days of Christmas was fun because it was based on the song The 12 Days of Christmas, and so then each story was about a different line from the play or from the Christmas song. And so it was good. And The Case of the Twain Papers was with Mark Twain.
Okay.
He and his family were in England, and he was doing shows at comedy shows, or well, I guess humorous readings, not comedy shows. No improv. Well, sort of
I have
improv.
this image of Mark Twain doing stand-up in my head.
Yes, well, he was known as being quite a quips. You know, his quips were always really funny. I'm not really a Mark Twain fan, and
The only Mark Twain I've liked is the guy that was in one of the episodes of Star Trek Next Generation.
Okay.
When they time travel to find data
I'm
or
not
something.
a Mark Twain fan at all. I did not like Tom Sawyer. I did not like Huckleberry Finn. The language is hard. I'm just not a fan in any way, shape, or form. So I really wasn't nuts about the Twain Papers because Mark Twain always, I think, tries too hard to be funny. You know, thinks he's
funny.
Yeah. And so I was sort of not as fond of that book because I didn't like Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Or I didn't care for Mark Twain. And I was sort of like, okay, we can be done with this. Let's move on. So of course I did to the Vampire Knitting Club.
Yeah.
So I've really elevated my
That's okay.
reading tastes. So what else are you
To each
reading?
his own. What else have I read? I read one that it's hard to explain. I know I didn't like it, but I'm not 100% sure that anything actually happened while I was reading the book.
What do you mean?
So the book was called The Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. And this was it was written in the 60s, and it's been made into a movie and a mini-series, I believe, on Amazon. And so the premise on the back of the book is, well, first of all, they equate it to Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. So I was thinking it's going to be suspenseful, you know, sort of that
is
sort of
not
a book.
a fun story.
But you see what I'm getting at, though. So it's takes place in, I believe, the 1800s, or late 1800s, early 1900s, at a girls' college in Australia. And they're going out for the day to this park with the big rock feature, the Hanging Rock. They're going out for this picnic for the day, and while they're at this picnic, 3 girls and a teacher go missing.
Ooh, that's a lot.
So when I started reading the book, my thought is, okay, these girls have randomly walked off. You're going to be learning what happened to them. No.
No.
It's like you never hear anything else about what might have happened to these women.
I mean, they're just gone.
They're just gone. And
Did anyone look for them?
Yes, they looked for them, but there's like a random chapter about this guy that had seen them, and he goes out to look for them, and then he sort of goes crazy, and then he's sick, and then they find one, but she never really says anything. She doesn't know what happened. They never touch on what actually happened. All you hear a lot about how the headmistress is upset because everybody's pulling their kids out of the school now.
Oh, because
and she's going to lose money, and then she disappears. She goes up to the Hanging Rock and disappears too. And I mean, the book sort of ends, and you're like, okay, I don't know what happened to any of these people. I know kind of what happened to some people who were also in the general vicinity, but I sort of came away feeling like I didn't learn anything. There was no like wrap up conclusion like, oh, it was supposed to be suspenseful, like we just don't know what happened to these people, but it's like they didn't even touch on.
So they
that.
left you hanging?
There, you weren't even hanging. You didn't even get lifted off the ground, really, to be left hanging. I mean, it sort of was like this whole thing with them disappearing was just something that had happened, and then this is what happened in everybody's life after they disappeared.
But it had no relevance.
But there wasn't like, it wasn't like because these people were gone, all this, like sort of did because the school was closing. But it was like nothing else really.
So what was the point of the
connected.
book?
I don't know. I wish I did. I was so confused when I finished. I was like, I don't even, because I was sitting there trying to think about ways to explain it on here to talk about it. And part of me was like, I don't even think I should really talk about it on here because I can't explain it, what happened, because I'm not 100% sure what happened. And then I was sitting there when I finished and I was like, and I don't even know how they could make a movie and a miniseries
Out of this book.
Because nothing happened.
What's the name of this book again?
It's Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan. It's either Joan or Joanne Lindsay. I have no idea.
And what prompted you to read this book?
It was talked about as somebody's favorite book on What Should I Read Next, a podcast.
And what did they like about it?
I'd have to go back and listen again. It was one of those that I heard, so I wrote it down, and then I found it on Thrift Books cheap, and I was like, oh, I've wanted to read this one for a while. So I ordered it, but I finally read it, and I was like, yeah, no. I'm like, this is reading time I cannot recollect and take back with me, so.
Yeah, I really take offense when I read a bad book. I mean, I really do, because you wasted my time. You sold me a bill of goods.
Especially when you hear, because the person hosting the podcast and the person reading it were raving about how good it was and how it was this classic, going to become this classic work. And I was like, I know. Just no. So part of me is like, I don't even know if I want to listen to this show anymore because it's been that way with the last couple books that I've read from them and suggested.
Bait and hook, huh?
Yeah. You're not even, like I said, you're not even left hanging because it doesn't really pull you off the ground.
Well, it's really frustrating though when you read a book like that that's gotten a big buildup.
Yeah.
And then you keep waiting for the,
because everybody's like, oh, the people read some of the books you see on Facebook. Oh, I read this book and it was life-changing. It's so great. Everybody needs to read it. And you read it and you're like, okay, it was a book.
Yeah, that's about it.
I don't see, but I mean, that's how it was with me with Gone Girl and some of those books too, which, we've talked about. We don't have to go back down that road. That is a dark tunnel we don't need to traverse.
We vote no on those books.
We did.
I just don't understand, with Gone Girl in particular, what was it because it was so different? Is that, do you think, what people liked about it?
I'm not sure.
I mean, there was not one redeeming character.
But I mean, it's the same sort of thing when you get the people that really like the 50 Shades of Grey books and those sorts of things. It's the same
But seriously, in Gone Girl, was there any character you liked? Every one of them. You sort of like the husband for a while, and he turns out to be a loser. No, the woman's a loser. The girlfriend's a loser. I mean, everybody is a loser in that book.
Yeah, that's true. But, so that was a disappointment. But then I did, I listened to the audiobook for Inheritance, the memoir of genealogy, Paternity and Love by Dani Shapiro.
That's gotten a lot of play. I've seen that in a bunch of places.
Yeah, that was really good. So the premise of this book is Dani Shapiro. She's written several memoirs. She comes from a very prominent Orthodox Jewish family. She knows her family history. Her husband is interested in finding out where his family comes from. So he orders the Ancestry DNA tests, and he has 2 of them, so just for fun, she decides to do one too. And so they send the results, they get the results back, and what her results should say based on her family history, it comes back and her paternity side doesn't match up.
Uh-oh, we have a problem.
She even compares with her half-sister, because her father was married twice. compare, because her half sister had done Ancestry, and they compare, and it comes back and it says the only way they'd be related was like 4 or 5 generations back.
Oh,
so they're
dear.
not even sisters. So she goes on this journey to find out what happened. Who she is, yeah. So, and I mean, so there was a lot of, the story is pretty much her parents were having issues conceiving, so they'd gone to this fertility clinic, and the fertility clinic was doing some shady business and mixing sperm that they shouldn't have been mixing, and so this donor was her father.
Wow. Although she was raised by her parents.
Yes, yep. And
although,
so
was her father supposed to be the donor?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and it actually, reading the book, the guy that was running this, the doctor that was running this clinic isn't actually a doctor.
Oh my.
And there's a whole bunch of stuff, but it's interesting because it's her coming to terms with, there's a lot, she goes to a lot of different rabbis, trying to figure out who her father is, and then she reaches out to him to get in touch with him and his family. And it was very interesting. She reads the audiobook and does a really nice job, but really, it's something that's becoming more and more prevalent with everybody doing these DNA tests and finding out these dirty little...
We've had a couple in our family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had a fellow in Colorado who was looking for his birth father.
Mm-hmm.
He was adopted, and when he did the DNA test, it came out matching my mom very highly. Mm-hmm. So, and then a woman contacted me through, again, Ancestry. Her father had been adopted, and they were looking for leads.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent her a bunch of family names to see if there was anything potentially that she might see, but I haven't heard back.
Okay.
But it is really interesting, and I think people, I've written about it before, but if you're going to do Ancestry, it's really important that you be prepared because you don't always know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
I know, and when I was reading this, I jokingly said to Mom, well, if I do this, is there anything I need to know before I do this? Because, but it's something, it's a reality for people that are doing this.
There's actually Facebook pages for people who find out their parents aren't their parents and all sorts of things. And one thing that I, a lot of people say, well, can you trust it? Do you believe it? And yet my mom and I took the test at the same time. You use different kits and you mail them off, and then they're ID'd by numbers. Yeah. And so, and then my sister Jill took it, and my sister Lynn took it, and when the results were all tabulated and put online, we came out as all siblings, and my mom was our parent.
That's good.
Yeah, but it's interesting because your friend Connie. She shows up as a cousin to my sister Lynn, and she does not show up on mine.
Yeah, I know, that's interesting.
And so when I saw Connie one night, we were talking about it, and she said we need to get together to look at it to figure this out. And so I said, yeah, we would do that. But one thing I want to do is Ancestry's added some new features, and so I need to get our family tree online because now it'll actually tell you who you're matching with within the family tree, because before it said second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, but it didn't tell you specifically where.
Well, and that's how within this book how she was able to narrow down who this father could be, because this person showed up as a first cousin who was not one of her known first cousins.
Right.
And so she was able to track it through him.
Right, and this fellow in Colorado who reached out to my mom, when we were talking about his birth father and he didn't have any information, I had told him, I said, you just need to wait, because with the volume of people taking the tests, eventually someone's going to match. Yeah. It's just going to happen. And a lot of people who think they have Native American blood, that's also showing up where it's not showing up at all, or it's so negligible. And again, it's because the pool of people taking the test is so small that as that grows, then greater
Yeah.
numbers will be applied to it. And
Yeah.
but it's a really interesting topic, and
It is, and it was really interesting to read or listen. I listened to it. As my husband will say, I didn't read the book. I consumed the book. But yeah, no, it was really interesting, and I'd recommend it. It was the first one of her memoirs I'd read.
And what's the name of it again?
It is Inheritance, a memoir of genealogy, paternity, and love, and that's by Dani Shapiro.
And I'm assuming you can borrow it through the library.
Yep, I got it through the library, through the Libby app.
Okay.
Yep.
And,
Audio.
you got the audiobook, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and stories like this are really powerful because it's interesting, the whole DNA thing,
Yeah.
but it's also, what is a family?
Yeah.
You know, what is your connection to someone else, and does the blood tie make it more of a family or less of a family?
Yeah. It's interesting.
How did it end? How did she?
Well, I don't want to ruin that. You guys have to read the book.
Oh,
if you
of course.
do read it, let me know what you thought about it. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram, or send us an email at offtheshelfbooktalk@gmail.com, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.